Welcome to the CTOX podcast. This is the place to be if you're a technology leader navigating the fractional CTO landscape. I'm Marisa Brasfield, joined by Lior Weinstein, the visionary behind CTOX.
Here, we cut through the noise to deliver actionable insights for CTOs at every stage, whether you're looking at your first five-figure client or actively building systems to scale.
That's right. You'll learn principles, not just tactics, to transform your technical expertise into a thriving fractional practice. Let's dig in. Welcome back to the CTOX podcast. You may have heard the phrase, retainers pay the bills, but what if they're also the ceiling? In today's episode, we unpack how the best fractional CTOs negotiate upside, so equity, revenue share, performance bonuses, without sounding greedy or blowing the deal. Because the goal isn't just to charge more. The goal is to align your impact with your income and create real wealth through creating results. Lior, welcome back. I love this subject.
Yeah, this is really probably one of the more reality shifting, moments in a fractional CTO's career when they manage to land one of these deals and really just change the economics of whatever they thought they're going to make.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I often hear you tell our CTOXs is retainer isn't the ceiling. So, let's start there. What do you mean? And why should fractional CTOs start thinking beyond just the monthly fees?
So one of the first kind of big reality breakdowns we try to do at the accelerator is trying to shift people's mindsets from hourly to retainer, which is already a thing, right, that they need to go through. And we hear these questions come, well, what happens if a customer asks you, if a prospect asks you about how many hours and so forth? And we have talking tracks and we recorded a whole podcast episode about this on your menu and your fees. But the next one, once we convince them it's not about the hourly, it's not about the effort, it's about the outcome and the output. So shifting retainers makes the relationships better for you, makes the results better for your client. The next one is really creating this upside. And the context is tying into outcome and results. And really, if you can't tie your value to results, you'll always be stuck justifying your rate. And when you can shift the conversation into outcome and results, then it's much easier to also anchor into much more reward, right? Much more payoff. Because if you're managing to save them $1 million, like I've had cases where I saved companies literally like $400,000 a month by re-engineering their team differently, or created millions of dollars of savings or tens of millions in revenue because of the systems that I built. And when you have the right relationship and the right frame, tying into your reward being related to those savings and those business outcomes is profound. Because then instead of, even if you can charge a premium rate as a fractional CTO, so let's say you do manage to charge the highest end of our industry, like 15, 20, 30,000 a month, that's very different than being able to command another $100,000 bonus or a $500,000 bonus, or of course, equity and upside in the company's performance as a whole.
Yeah, and fractional with upside is a great model for the business owner. Many of them want to be generous with their executives, but they may not be in a position to take on that risk up front. How do these outcome based deals change the relationship and ultimately turn CTOXs from a cost center into a growth partner?
So, because you're really, if you do it right, you're really trying to focus the original conversation all around outcome. And which means a few things. One, they're learning to talk to you as a peer, because that's what the CEO is thinking about. The CEO is thinking about creating value, maybe creating value for themselves or for their investors. So they're and being able to pay salaries and benefit the clients. So as long as you're starting the conversations through that same frame, they see you as a peer. Now, their reward as a CEO is that reward, right? It's the reward of growing the company, pulling profits, selling the company, creating a return for themselves, for the anybody that took risk, right? If it's employees for discounted rates, if it's for investors for injecting capital. So if you start with that frame, now you're also very normally in that same realm of reward, right? And then when clients see you as a growth driver and non-expense, everything changes because they're also doing it for the reward. They're not thinking about their salary as a cost center. So they're thinking about their investment, whatever their money they're trying to get out of the business, as the thing that's causing the growth of the business. And if you start off that conversation, you're positioning there on the reward side. So it makes sense for you to participate in the reward. And then again, instead of making 100,000 or 200,000 from a client, you potentially can make millions of that client because from the very first moment, because you're tying into outcome and you're saying it's not about the risk of me making full time, it's already the starting position, but rather all the conversation is about the outcome. So they see you as also taking the risk just like they are. And they're looking at you like a proper growth partner. And the cost just becomes irrelevant because it goes straight to a mindset of investment and not expense.
Let's talk about structure. What are your favorite ways to build in upside, whether it's equity, rev share, performance bonuses? And how do you protect yourself when you are ultimately not in direct control of the full outcome?
So, first of all, very important to note, I never position the upside as a discount to my rates or fees, right? So I'm not going to be in a conversation ever where I'm like, well, I'm going to charge you 12, 15,000, but because I'm getting upside, I'm going to charge you 10 or 12. So for me, upside is really a bonus. It's really cherry on top. I'm getting the upside because I'm doing the work, right? Like Lior is doing the work. Because if you had somebody else doing the work, they're not going to create the same outcome or result. So very important to know. Now, upside is complex because it depends on what you're tying it into. If the conversation and the outcome is strictly around cost, so let's say it's an organization with 200 people, and you're over the next 18 months are going to create technology that's going to allow them to double without hiring anyone, which otherwise they would have hired maybe another 100. That's a potential cost saving. Another one is actual cost saving, meaning take it down from 200 to 150, and that's one kind of conversation. So you can bank the success on the actual cost saving you're creating for the company, which is the best way is just to get a share of that, to get a cut of that. And not, I wouldn't say percentage. I like fixed numbers because fixed numbers are easy to measure and easy to report on, easy to pay out, and so on. If I can do based on outcome, I prefer at this point in my career, most of my upside really comes from, let's say, three main models. Either revenue share over a baseline, and the baseline is built on whatever the company is already expecting to make and to produce without me existing, right? So without me creating the new product, without me creating the new technologies, the new efficiencies. The reason I do revenue is because that's the easiest thing to measure. Profitability is very finicky, and there's just a lot of things that can affect it. So, but revenue is more objective. So, and that means obviously much lower revenue share. It's not 10% revenue share, as opposed to maybe profit share would have been 10% or 5%. But revenue is an easy thing to measure, and it's a thing you can measure every month, every week, and so on. The next one is performance, meaning if we get to this result by 6 months or 12 months, I want triple my fees, right? So let's say I would have made 150, I want another 450 after 12 months if we achieve these milestones, and so on. Why? Because it's just cash, it's objective, it's a payoff, and so on. And the last one is enterprise value created. So whatever the enterprise value of the company now, and we're creating whatever we're creating together from the moment I join, I get 10% or 5%, whatever it is, from the new value created. Those deals are really reserved for the best kind of relationship. So the most trusted partner is the one that we know we're going to be with together for many years because it's not about a 1 year turnaround. Now, in terms of protection, it's a good question. I mean, generally speaking, if you don't control the outcome, you can't bank on the upside, which is part of the risk. Right? It's part of the risk you're taking. It's part of the risk they're taking as well, because you're a part of it. You're not 100% in control, and certainly because you're not the CEO, there's always a limit to whatever you can control in the scenario. I'm not obsessive about it because it's cherry on top. Like I said, I'm not discounting my fees for the upside. And I care really more about this win win scenario than a lose, because the reality is, if we lost because of me or not, we still lost, right? So most of the protection I'm trying to build is protection from like a bad actor, meaning they're not honoring our agreement. Now, I underwrite that risk in different methods anyway, because I'm all about the freedom of relationship and do I want to have a relationship with that person? So if they end up, quote unquote, like screwing me over, I'm like, okay, thank you for letting me know, because I'm looking for lifetime relationships. So if you ended up not honoring something, after a year or two, that tells me a lot. And thank you for giving me the rest of my life, so I don't have to invest myself and my energy with you. I can just find somebody else to do it. So I'm really focused on win-win, and if we win, it's a non-issue. And if we lose, then yeah, even though I did my part, the reality is we lost, right? The investors lost, the CEO lost, the employees lost, like everybody lost. So I'm not as obsessive about making sure that I get my cut, even though, not it is a team sport. It's not personal. When it is super specific to me, then I just try to make it fixed, very objective. Here's the cash payout I want. Here's the time or the event that we're going to tie it in, and it's in the agreement and it's black and white. And of course, there's always a question if they don't honor, but I consider that a different kind of risk. A relationship risk is a different kind of risk than performance risk.
Yes. So, what does this sound like in conversation? I heard you say and mention the win win, and I love that frame. I love how you negotiate partnerships from that perspective because it really does feel like you're negotiating with everyone's best interest in hearts. But materially, what does this sound like in conversation?
So it depends on the kind of deal. Very common in the accelerator, for example, when people do workshops. So they might pitch it for like $7,500, and I tell them, hey, let's change this. Let's say it's 15,000, but it's 7,500 down and 7,500 at the end when you deliver, if they're satisfied. And that frame is super interesting because it puts, from a perception standpoint on the client, it puts this perception that they're not going to pay the full price unless they're satisfied. From a CTO perspective, from a service provider, you basically got 100% of the money you would have done it anyway, but upfront. And now it actually puts it on you to make sure that they're satisfied. So it gets to this point where they're paying more if they're happy to pay more, and they're going to pay more if you made them happy. So it's a dual position where it makes the deal better for both sides, both on the remuneration perspective and on the quality. So the risk is suddenly priced, right? I'm basically paying 50%. So it's not zero. Now, some of the de-risk element, you can say zero, don't pay me at all. Sometimes I do it. So like I had a fractional client just this year that said, hey, just pay me in 3 months. You're going to pay me zero for the first 90 days, but day 91, you're going to pay me for 6 months. So you're going to pay me for the last 3 months and the next 3 months. And that's also a great de-risking. Now, in that kind of deal, I'm taking 100% of the risk, because if by day 90 it didn't work out, I'm all out. But that kind of a deal allowed me to command a retainer that's double, most people normal's retainer, because I'm actually positioning is like, hey, if in 3 months we're not gonna know if this is a good fit, don't worry about it. But if we know it's a good fit, I want a bi-directional commitment. All right, I'm gonna commit to you, you're gonna commit to me, uh, with a higher fee retainer with a split payment model. Now, if you don't believe your upside helps the client, you'll always sound defensive. And you'll notice that in both of these examples, this kind of micro one-time project or a big, could be a $200,000 deal, it feels great. As soon as I said it, I'm sure you're hearing this, and it's like on the other side, it's like, yeah, that's a good deal because it is. And I feel that it pacifies all of their concerns, which is really, what's their concern? Paying money, not getting value, right? Or committing to you for a long period of time and then realizing after a month or two was a huge mistake. So that's the emotional, risk that they're perceiving. And with those examples, I'm I'm showing them that they need any defense budget on this relationship. They can just disarm. There's not going to be a position where they pay money and they're not satisfied with the service, or they're not like overpaying for something they think is actually worth less. That's where the satisfaction comes in.
I'm just reflecting of all the different relationships in my past where I did have a defense budget that I wasn't really closely managing. Thank you for naming that.
Yeah.
Such a great line. And there is, it's true. As you were going through that conversation, I felt myself relax, and especially in those couple examples where, all right, we've got some time to figure this out, and if we both decide this is a yes, that bi-directional commitment, it does. And from a sales psychology perspective, I love the tie down, but I also
Mhm.
love the transfer of certainty. We've talked about both those concepts in previous episodes. So it's neat to hear those tactics play out so effortlessly in conversation, which is really cool. So you have the conversation, you have the agreement, things are in play, and then business happens. I know you've been parts of big pivots or delays, or things happen in the market that are totally out of control of the business owners. In these cases, how do you stay flexible without renegotiating everything from scratch?
Yeah, so a few things. If you tie your upside to the wrong milestone, you'll be working for free when plans change. So I do like event trigger models more than time trigger models. Exactly. When we're talking about a specific outcome. And the reason is maybe I can make the outcome come in way sooner. So why do I need to wait a year if I made it happen in 3 months? And maybe it's going to take longer because of market, because of scope changes, because of hiring issues, like any number of things can make things elongate a goal. So I very much prefer event trigger deals rather than time trigger deals. Um, but of course, time trigger deals are super common, like the example of the 3 months, and so on. But the 3 months wasn't actually, that's not a good example because it was an upside, but it was a way to get a higher compensation from the relationship. In terms of staying flexible, my model is that I'm trying to get clients forever. All right. So I'm not trying to get a 3 month project. I'm not trying to get a 6 month project. I'm trying to be in a relationship for a very long time, which means I need to be aligned with the CEO. The CEO also doesn't like pivots or delays. Like if you pivot on purpose, right? So I'm trying to get extreme alignment with the CEO because that's what they're going through. If the CEO I'm talking to right now, she's going to tell me, listen, we have to change strategy. She wants to change strategy. Like she's not doing it because she thinks the older strategy is better. She thinks she's doing it because the new strategy is better. And I'm there to support her. So if I'm working with a partner, I'm trying to make sure that my work is always aligned with their goals because they're my client. And I'm there to give them feedback. That's part of my value as another C suite, telling them my idea for strategy, maybe it's going to change. And if we need to pivot, then we need to pivot. Then it is what it is. If we're changing the business model and I can tie in my compensation out to how many customers we're going to have because we change it from B2C to B2B. So instead of having 100,000 customers, we're going to have 1,000. Okay, so I can't, and we see this sometimes in contracts. They're going to make another $200 a month, per customer, but now the customer profile changes. But the key is to get a model in. So as long as they're a model in, changing the variables. So instead of every 1,000 or every 100,000, changing for every 10, that's easy. And or changing the model to a new model, that's also easy. But not having a model and then introducing one, that's very difficult. Part of the value I bring is really just being a partner to these companies. And just like companies have to pivot and have to suffer delays, I need to be aligned with that. And that just builds more trust with them. Because again, I'm not saying, well, you want to change, but what about me? I'm like, no, we're together. We're flowing together. We're moving together. And as long as I set the expectation from the beginning, I kind of tell them, hey, this is how much money I'm trying to make. Right. Then they're aligned. And now they're my partner in helping me figure out the upside because they know that if they're not going to figure it out, I might leave. And they don't want it. And I don't want it. So as long as I'm not making a big fuss about pivots or delays, and we generally created some model that we can play with the variables, and we were more event triggered than time triggered, then it usually works itself out.
Beautiful. So, for someone listening to this episode who has never incorporated upside into their agreements, what's one thing they can do right now?
I would say look at the business results that you're creating and try to think, and you can, this is a good one with like a chat GPT or a Claude or like any AI thinker. Actually, in the accelerator, we have a whole deal GPT we develop for our members, right? They can kind of put in their deal and give a lot of ideas on how to structure different upside. But whatever deal you have right now, look at the business value you're creating and kind of saying, well, understand or try to think if you didn't do what you were about to do, would they have created the value? So if the answer is no, they would not have created the value, then good. You have a potential upside thing to tie into and ideate, well, what would be nice? Because if you're creating millions and you're like, well, yeah, 1% of, 1 or 2% of 10 million, that's nice for me to get another 100 grand or 200 grand. So I would say start by looking at all the relationships you have right now and try to mine where are you actually creating value and then just start thinking about ideas. Of course, if you have the opportunity to pitch, then you should pitch.
Amazing. I love this conversation on Upside, and I think I'm even more excited for our next one, which is going to be about habitats for inspiration as an entrepreneur. I'll see you there.
See you then.
That wraps up another episode of the CTOX podcast. We hope today's conversation gave you the tools and inspiration to advance your journey as a fractional CTO.
And don't forget, if you want more in-depth support or to connect with our community of fellow fractional CTOs, visit us at ctox.com.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on the CTOX podcast.